So the other day can be anywhere from 6 months ago, 2 months ago, 2 weeks ago. One of you guys left me a comment that relieved me because I felt like, based on your own personal experience in real life, you were putting into words something that I have expressed before, but because it comes from your experience and you simplify it much better than me being all wordy, it really brought me so much life to my soul. I can't even describe it, so I'm just gonna dive into it. A user by the name of Omega Primus told me that he started a job at a grocery store, but he signed up for night shift because he didn't want to deal with people, pretty much, particularly unnecessary challenges due to unnecessary ignorance. If you watched my last video, you will know that I worked self-checkout, and if you have known me for a while, you know that self-checkout is one of the jobs that I absolutely detest the most. And while I was working that shift, I was extra aware of that comment, that phrase of unnecessary ignorance. But prior to today, for the past 2 shifts I've had, that phrase came to mind a lot, because even when I was on the register, that unnecessary ignorance kept coming up. So today, during self-checkout, that same usual basic stuff happened, such as the weird way that people try to bag things. Let's say that you're trying to unload your cart. For some reason, you want to reach over for things from the side of the cart that's most uncomfortable. To give an example, let's say that you're reaching into the basket portion of the cart. For some reason, people like to reach over the little handle for you to push, and then the area where children sit, and you like to reach over those things to grab things from the basket side, as opposed to getting on the side of the cart or on the very front of the cart where the thing hangs lower and the distance is much shorter for you to unload your stupid things. Another thing I saw was someone was grabbing things from underneath the very bottom of the cart. You guys know we have that little platform for cases of water, things like that. Well, for some reason, this lady had raw meat, which I understand why you want to separate that and put it in plastic bags perhaps. But this lady was trying to grab the raw meat through the little gap where, you know how that bottom platform has like a little wall, it sticks up a little bit. For some reason, this lady, as opposed to taking 3 more steps to again step on the side of the cart or on the front of it so that you have no obstacles in front of you, she was trying to fit her arm through that little hole between whatever that is, that very bottom platform, and then that little thing that like sticks up weird. I don't know what you call that. Imagine jets that take off from a carrier, how they have that little platform thing. I forgot the name of that too. I'm telling you, like, I'm so overwhelmed. But anyway, that little thing. And for some reason, she kept sliding the items, the meat, through that. Again, you could grab all of those things if you reach through the side of the cart where there's no obstruction. So that is an example of unnecessary ignorance, and I call it like that because I'm like, this is a lack of technique. A lack of technique is an extension of ignorance. There's no other way to describe it. So I just said to myself, all I have to do is just stand here and let it go because it's not my problem. Another thing that someone tried to get into an argument with me was, you guys know how there are certain self-checkout machines that you really have to press that pay now button in order for it to transition into taking your payment. Well, people have this habit of running their card first before they even begin scanning things. And I get it, you're trying to like take a shortcut and pay quicker, but I prefer to scan everything, push the button, and then run my card, because I just don't see the point of overwhelming the computer with that much information to process at the same time. But I don't expect you as the customer to be thinking like me, because you're not supposed to. We're not the same. That's why you're the customer and I'm the freaking employee. But that rush, that hurry is another thing that I consider unnecessary ignorance, because you just assume that just because you ran your card that the machine is just gonna magically know that you're done scanning. You forego pressing that pay now button, which is like the biggest button on the screen, and then you call me over and I'm like, hey, what's up? You don't even say anything, you just go, and I'm like, sorry, what's the problem? And then you go, well, it's just I'm trying to pay and this thing is not taking my payment. And then I look at the screen and the fucking pay now button is still there glittering and you haven't pressed it. Again, unnecessary fucking ignorance. Those are the little things that make me feel like, sure, that's my job. I'm there to take care of people, to help them seamlessly get from point A to point B in their shopping experience. But little details like that are the result of you just being aloof, that is the part that I feel professionally I was never prepared for. And I'm just observing that it keeps getting worse. And I just don't understand why it has to be that way. Why is it that you're not a little bit more astute? And I know that it's possible, because I know of individuals, including myself, who don't trip that hard, and we don't mentally block ourselves like that. You know what I mean? Like, I have never gotten owned by a stupid self-checkout, and this was way before my own store had self-checkout. It's very commonsensical. They get piloted, they get sampled by a broad number of people of all ages and backgrounds and things, before they launch it, to make sure that it's as simple as it can be. And somehow, even when we make this as simple as it can be, there's still a way to mess it up. Those are the things that I just did not prepare for. If as a child or a teen, you would have begun to raise me as, look, Zam, the reality of life is that there are people who refuse to read, there are people who don't pay attention, there are people who are not confident with what they do, things like that, then okay. But when as a child, I have my skills and my attention span honed so much, and then here I am in the real world and I see that that doesn't matter, because ultimately I over prepared for my future, which I'm living now. That is the part that doesn't click very well with my noodle. And like I've said before, the job is not a burden. I like the act of preparing for work, driving to work, clocking in, donning my uniform, and using my skills, physically moving, getting things done, getting things scanned, the lifting, the element, what it means to work. I don't mind that. It's not a burden for me at all. I cut myself. But I really hate the people's behavior. The reason I'm there, the reason I'm serving, the reason I'm working, it becomes overwhelming because of that unnecessary ignorance. Now that that fiasco's done. So anyway, if you guys wonder why I just said so anyway, it's because I have a separate video in which a little fiasco took place while I was making that video, and it involves this nail that you're gonna watch me messing with and this. So anyway, unnecessary ignorance. Moving on. And another thing that I see is the terrible bagging technique that some of you all follow, to where you just keep loading the bags without any regard for how and what order and what's in it. Like sometimes people will put bottles with fruits that have indefinite shapes and vegetables that also have indefinite shapes. And you just keep dumping things as you scan them with no thought to it. And then you can see that one side of the bag, if you press on it, it like has empty space, therefore you can deform the bag as opposed to it being evenly filled. And sometimes I think that is a symbol of our disconnect. Everybody's always moving in a hurry. I naturally move fast anyway, and when I'm in public, since I tend to be by myself a lot, I look at it as a safety, security thing. I want to be in and out as quickly as possible and not hang out for very long because you never know who's watching. But there are people whose hurry I simply cannot justify because it's like the speeder. The person who speeds by you is gonna run into a red light and then you'll catch up to them and be right next to them, and they did all that speeding, all that gas burning to not get anywhere. Just like the person who's also in front of you, the light is red, and for some reason they roll forward even though the car in front of them is still stopped because the light is red. Like, you ain't going nowhere. Why are you rolling your car? And then when the light changes and the car ahead of you is finally moving, you're not moving immediately. That type of thing. That's how the flow in grocery feels like. You could very well just take your time, slow down, be conscious of where you are, because that's another thing. People be showing me their barcodes for reward programs when we're not even the same fucking store. And that kind of ridiculousness is what tells me you are absent-mindedness. Another thing I have gotten is for online pickups. I have had people say, I have the Walmart pickup app. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then he was looking at me so like confused about me saying that I didn't understand what he meant. And then I was like, this is name of the place I work. And then he was like, oh, I don't know why I said that. Oh, I am so sorry, blah, blah, blah. So on top of unnecessary ignorance, there's also the unnecessary absent-mindedness. So that, along with the ignorance, it's the thing that is making my job super challenging. And when it comes to the unnecessary ignorance, there seems to be no discrimination with customers anymore, because back in the day when I was hired, to me the challenging customer was always the older customer, because they may have physical limitations, they may not be able to see, they may get confused by the machine, they may get confused by how to get their rewards program pulled up. Is it by phone number? Is it by your little barcode? Do you have the right key today? Are you driving the right car? Therefore, do you have the right set of keys where your rewards thingy is attached to? So on and so forth. And the worst part is if I ask you, how do you regularly do it? And you dead ass don't tell me. You don't know. You're like, we can try the phone number, and when they say that, I know that it's not going to work because you usually have your barcode and therefore you haven't registered it. See what I mean? And in an ideal world, our computer would be smarter and just automatically do that, but sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. With me personally, it never worked. I had to go in there and actually get it set up, and from my register, sometimes I can add the phone number to your account, sometimes I cannot. I don't know why it does that. I'm not a techie. And that's what I mean. Keep up with your own personal matters. If you know you're going to visit, have your materials ready. And another thing that people love to fight me on is sale prices. There are two kinds of prices. One kind of price is the regular price. When something is on sale, it of course drops. And in other instances, if we're running a special promotion and you have your little most valuable player card, then you scan that and you get an extra trivial amount of savings. but people expect for me to put my job on the line when they don't have their materials and ask me for me to run my employee discount, which is a completely separate thing. No, I'm not going to do that. I know that you're a stranger and I'm a stranger to you and you don't care about me, but I'm not about to lose my job just so that you can get a little ass discount at a store. And I had someone do that to me my last shift, not the one I worked today, but the previous one. She was like, so do you have a rewards program where you collect points? And I'm like, no, we don't do that. But what we do is you can register to have your own barcode thingy. It's like a rewards program, but it's not a point based system. It's when you grab something that's on sale and you scan it, it gives you a little extra discount. And then I asked her if she has it, and she said she doesn't. And then she asked me if I have one, and I'm like, yeah. And she's like, can I use it? And I say, no, because I'm an employee, I can't do that. And then she tried to get mad at me. I'm guessing at other stores, that is something the employees can do. Or maybe the employees are not supposed to do that, but they take their chances and they clandestinely do that for the customer. I'm sorry, but again, I like to follow the book. If the book says doing this gets me fired, I'm not going to try it, period. And again, it's a woman by herself trying to do that. And she tried again. She said, well, you must have your own discount program. I get it, the economy is bad, you're paying with food stamps, you probably have children, whatever. I'm sorry that the economy is bad right now and that maybe you have needs, but what about me? Why do you not understand? Again, unnecessary ignorance. You ought to know that this is not something that I just can do. I'm not trying to bullshit you or act in bad faith. I cannot hook you up with unauthorized discount, and my employee discount is 100% an unauthorized transaction. Sorry, I am not going to take my chances for you. And even if I knew you, even if you were my mom, my best friend, they wouldn't do that to me because A, they care, B, they know better, and 3, they just don't try that bullshit. So maybe you went to another place and they did that for you, good for you, but you cannot expect for that accommodation to happen everywhere. That type of stupid ignorance, or I guess it's the aloofness and desperation of the moment and your lack of preparedness, is what makes this challenging. And I don't like that. I really don't like that. But yeah, I just wanted to share that and give a shout out to the author of that comment and let you guys know that a comment like that, as super basic and simple as it is, that phrase, unnecessary ignorance, has been a phrase that has been following me daily ever since I read it. Like whenever it was that I left you my first reply to that comment about a week ago, maybe, that was my first time reading it. And then I said, OMG, that phrase is going to have an impact on me in the same manner that another one of you guys years ago, I was ranting about old people, and one of you guys said, well, the thing about them is you reach a certain age in which they begin to lack confidence. And when I think about certain people I see in my day, that is a display. They do display a lack of confidence. Like they'll come up to the self-checkout area, such as today, what I saw today, and they'll be looking at the machine all confused and shit, and they'll immediately, without even trying, they'll say, I don't know how to do this. I'll need your help. And the problem is that usually means do everything yourself, which I cannot do. But that lack of confidence, when I was in school, I remember some of my teachers, especially math teachers, preparing you for the final exam, they would say, try to do something to the question, try to guess, try to input the multiple choice answers into the equation to see if it works. Just try. Don't just look at it and be like, oh my god, it looks big, it has a lot of letters, and numbers and all that. Just make it smaller, break it up into smaller pieces. You know what an item is, you know what a barcode is. Grab it, go like that at the thing where the light displays, which you have observed other cashiers do for decades. Try it. But that insecurity, I guess, coming from, this is me totally trying to guess why, because I'm not like that, therefore I cannot begin to figure out why that is. But let's just say that it's because you care about how you look, or if other people are looking at you. Nobody is fucking looking at you when you go up to the machine and work on it. Maybe the employee, but the employee has to scan what you're doing, scan what the other person is doing. I'm not fixating my gaze on you and be like, let me see how good you are at this. We don't care. But when you walk in with that attitude of, I'm gonna need help, and this is not your first time being here, and things like that, that is the kind of shit that makes me feel like you just like to act dumb so that we have to carry your weight. No, don't. So anyways, you guys, I hope that makes sense. I hope my venting and ranting makes sense. And for the user who left the unnecessary ignorance comment, thanks again, because I'm pretty sure you had no idea that such a simple thing would have an impact on me. But I just want you to know that self-checkout is not a shift I ever get scheduled for. This is the first time I work an actual shift in about a year, so I've been very fortunate there. And last week I was supposed to have worked this shift, but I switched it with somebody else, so I became the housekeeper instead, which I love to do anyway. I remember when I couldn't escape this shift, I considered calling out very strongly, but if I would have done that, it would have been a disaster because we were already down someone at customer service. And this someone at customer service, I remember talking to him and be like, so are you gonna be here on Wednesday? And he said, yeah. And then I said, good, because I'm gonna need all the support and motivation I can have to show up. Then I show up and he doesn't. So I was like, where my boy at? That was also part of my disaster day, which is one important person to the team. Everybody's important, but this person missing was actually a supervisor. To not have him there is like, fuck me. So I also looked at it as, it's not about me, but I'm gonna make it about me and be like, although this is something I was counting on, it's not here, what do I do? Fortunately, I only had one person touch me, you know, that rubbing my shoulder thing that I've told you guys I hate people do. And that's why I hate self-checkout, because I don't have a boundary. Only one incident like that, but this person is harmless. She is one of those people who's very expressive with her hands, and she's been there much longer than I've been working there, and we have had conversations, and she's always genuinely asking about me, asking about my boyfriend and things like that. So like, I get it. And her husband is also there all the time, but when I felt that, I was like, you're not necessarily an authorized person, but I can forgive it. And then two other people also tried to like do that thing when I resolved a problem at the register, and then they tried to come at me, and I was like, I'm just glad that I have fast cat reflexes, but I hate that because I'm anticipating that someone is going to do that and I want to be prepared to dodge it. That makes me have my adrenaline high throughout the shift. Therefore, throughout the shift, I felt a little sick. Like my chest was tight. I was hyperventilating here and there. My heart rate was up. Like I could feel my heart eroding away my internal walls, whatever they are, muscles, and my rib cage probably. So that is what I don't like, because it's a place where I don't feel at ease. I don't feel peaceful. And if I cannot feel peaceful, I cannot relax. So when I cannot relax, that's when my anxiety starts creeping in. But again, fortunately, I had those indirect resources working with me, like say things like the unnecessary ignorance and the whole older people aren't confident. And I see those behaviors because you guys put into words something that I had observed. And when it's put into words, it's easier to process. And that's what I like. I like coaching, even if it's indirect. And one of the things that makes me sad about the hiring process nowadays is that we don't tend to have an experienced, legit veteran of the company giving classes like that to the new hires. Whom better than an actual human who's been on your role to welcome you and coach you on how to get on board with the team. For the new people who don't get better, but if they do, it's slow. That's one of the things I think about. I had the advantage of having a live instructor who was able to coach me and answer my questions. This person was thrown into a computer and that's all they had, and they had maybe like 30 minutes to tour around and meet people, but it's not like you are being impacted in the 3 minutes that you interact with your new colleague. So that's why when I'm interacting with somebody and someone else tries to come over and be a clown and plow themselves into my conversation, I'm like, were you invited into this conversation? No? Leave. Goodbye. If what you have to say is not an emergency, I don't want to hear it. He or she who's with me doesn't want to hear it. Leave. Goodbye. And I'm like that. I'll be like, all right, goodbye, goodbye, gone, out. See ya. I do that to my manager. I do that to my assistant manager. I do that to my supervisor. If you were not part of the original conversation, you're not going to become part of the conversation. Leave. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts as always, and I'll see you soon.